Good morning, everyone. I am not Gracia Vara because we have got a technical problem that we are trying to solve. My name is Isania Aparicio. I'm the business director at EIPA, and in any case, I was ready to talk to you later, so I join right now while we try to recover my colleague Gracia. If we have learned something during the past months due to the pandemic, is that collective action, both across borders and at home, requires rethinking the role of the private sector and government. To discuss what business needs from public administrations, I would like to introduce you to our next panelist. We also had a last-minute cancellation, unfortunately, from Dr. Antonella Mein-Potzle. But we have today with us Mr. Jens Meyer, adjunct professor at INSEAD. His research, teaching, and consultancy focuses on innovation and change. His approach is to explore managerial beliefs, reveal cognitive biases, and propose means and measures to adapt to transform or overcome this. Good morning, Mr. Meyer. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to my wonderful little study in Fontainebleau. You're sitting in the middle of the nicest forest in Europe. My name is Jens, and somebody came up some months back and asked me, Jens, how can we look at public administration in a different way? And it was a wonderful journey for me. And the first thing which emerges as the answer, let me put it up front, what business needs is humbleness, empathy, curiosity, willingness to learn. How do we get there? I've prepared a whole storyline. I'm going to give you some good news. I'm going to give you then some more troubling news. We're going to look at the symptoms and the causes, and I'll try to suggest some ways how to bridge this world. What's the problem? And the problem, we have two parties sitting in the same boat, looking at the same horizon, looking in the same direction, but the one is paddling, the other one is rowing. So we're pretty inefficient in the way we move forward currently. These two parties, business and public administration, have grown apart, and there's something for us to do. I think there's a huge opportunity at the moment, but there's something to do. What's the good news in the story? The good news is we're looking in the same direction. Talking to my business contacts, talking to the different companies we're dealing with. So what do you expect from public administration? Very simple. This. And it was very much in line. Short-term, mid-term, long-term. If you talk about COVID relief measures, if you talk on a big scale, multilateral relationships, you talk about the Green Deal. The very, very, very good news is, for all of us, we actually want the same: public administration and business. There's no discussion. The problem then comes into place when we look into how. And there it becomes fascinating. What business needs from public administration, after having cleared the ambition, the goal, is the form and functioning of business, to match business requirements, or in the language of public administration, the structure and operations. Let's look at the details. Talking to my contacts and getting the good answers of, hey, this is what we need, and feel very satisfied that there is the right ambition goal in mind. My next question is, so what do you do? And they say, oh, Jens, you haven't understood. Dealing with public administration is difficult. Tell me more. And what I learn is that probably more companies, more businesses make an effort to avoid public administration than to engage with it. In my world, where I come from, in the strategy world, we talk about non-customers. Public administration has more non-customers than it actually has loyal customers. What is a non-customer? Somebody who is actually kind of ignoring, trying consciously to ignore that there is somebody offering something. There is somebody who's trying to avoid as much as possible. or there are those who try to minimize the contact to the minimum. And if it's to the minimum, very often it's purely transactional. This is what we understand and what we see today, that most of the businesses probably spend more time and energy to avoid the engagement with public administration than to put both packages of energy together, coordinate, co-opt, and collaborate. So the question comes, how can we convert this energy which is existing in business to help us all moving forward? So what's the cause of the story? If we look at the one hand at the public administration, we have this wonderful story 50 years ago. Some people created a design brief, which was supposed to support a stabilizing world and an expectation of growth. And what has been done and has been executed, consequently, has been done wonderfully. For 20, 30 years, it did a perfect job. Compliment to everybody involved. I just grew up at this moment I was born. But I'm pretty fond of what happened these days. After 20, 30 years, this design brief certainly started getting cracks. And business took over. Business, who had benefited largely from this framework which has been provided, from the services which had been provided, business suddenly was facing emergence of all types of aspects, globalization, the big corporate players moving out across the world. Somewhat by the end of the 90s, you have been hit by the internet, starting developing new business models, the markets getting more power, other technologies moving in, radical changes in the logic of supply chains. Businesses for the last 20 years had to change their design brief several times. And the biggest shift which took place for business was to move from a resource or supply-based view at the world, I am the one who's driving it, to, wait a moment, if I don't shift towards the customer centricity, recognizing the market-centric aspects, I will not survive. And you see many of these players, and probably learning hard lessons along the line, how they've moved over to become a very strong player by responding to the market as being probably the most stable part in this world. So now you have the worlds. You have the one with a 50-year-old design print, and you have the one which has learned or had to learn, if they wanted to survive, those who didn't, have not survived, that they had to adapt and shift their focus to the market. It feels to me a little bit like a couple which had a wonderful lifetime, two people having different roles at different stages of the upbringing of the kids, of the home. One takes more case of the economic part, and the other of the tender loving care. And one day, the kids left home. What happened? These two people suddenly realize that there's a gap, that there's a cognitive and then even an emotional gap emerging from there. What's happening is that they lost the ability to talk to each other, that their life operates in different rhythms, that the one is probably spending more time in his study and the other one in another study, in another office, or in the garden. And I somewhat have the feeling this is what happened to public administration and business. The question becomes, how can we bridge the cognitive gaps which experience? Are there really cognitive gaps? Let me give you an example from your private life. How many times have you overspent money on a gift because you realized you didn't have spent enough dedication to the loved one around you? So what I'm trying to address is this wonderful opportunity, both parties looking into the same direction, but haven't gotten out of rhythm, haven't gotten out of contact. Once the one has found itself in an artificial, fairly stable world, the other one had to change, had to move. So how do we recover from this cognitive or even emotional disconnect? How can we go back into the mode of reconciliation, seduction, or adaptation? For the public administration, what it means that it starts building empathy. Let me start with the couple. Love, tender care is the part which is required, but then it's humbleness and empathy for the other partner in order to have the conversation again. For business, it was the humbleness and the empathy for their market. They had to build it. But then on top of it was curiosity and the willingness to learn. For public administration to rebuild the relationship, to regain the recognition, so that energy flows to them, not away from them, they probably have to do all of them. But what does it mean to be empathetic from a sense of a public administrator, from the public sector? It means not to judge. I've been in several conversations where I have the feeling there is this level of resentment. What do they are asking? There is this level of kind of, we know better, they don't understand us. Somebody who wants to express his empathy accepts the other, is willing to listen in, is willing to understand, is not judging why somebody got into the situation, how he got into the situation. It's status quo. It does not mean that public administration has to do what business tells them to do. Far from it. The empathy requires not to judge. And very often we are looking, oh, we have to protect society from business. Are you sure? So too many judgments taking place, too many conversations breaking down. The second part is the curiosity part, which is important. What is required for public administration is to become curious and ready to learn. What does this mean, being curious and ready to learn? It means being ready to get under the skin of the actor. And again, the purpose is not to do what they tell you, but it is to spend time and understand. This means doing your homework. I've seen conversations where we have people meeting and saying, can you tell me how many people work for you? Come on, this is not professional. Any website will tell you with any partner which you're going to meet. The second thing is, if once you've done your homework and you step in, start an inquiry which is open, don't close it. Try to learn your lesson. Illustrate that you're willing to learn. This is a party where conversation takes place, and it is the base for co-option and collaboration. It starts with the co-option, and the co-option starts with an inquiry. At the later stage, it becomes a collaborative effort. These efforts fail typically in industry, in families, or in your world, if somebody assumes a level of power or a level of knowledge superior to the others. On the other hand, if we are willing to be humble and go in there, we can nurture, we can groom conversations which are reciprocally beneficial for both sides. It's like this couple. If only they would start talking to it. And I'm going to continue with this analogy of the couple. When I want to have my wife coming in for 1 second. No, she hasn't kicked me out yet, so don't worry. So this is just a joke. The story for all of us is how can we re-engage in conversations, though that we match at the same level. So matching on the same level requires the humbleness, curiosity, and the willingness to learn. Once we have this, then we can start triggering and probing new conversations. Once we start probing new conversations, both sides start learning. So let me go one step further. Where do you start with something like that? You don't start in the past. If the public administration, is actually interested in moving down that road, gaining the energy which is available in business to support them, at this very stage, what public administration has to do is to look for new projects. If I look at the old projects, if I look at the old setup, I'm going to lose time and energy. I will never be able to change something if I'm not able to change the context. On the other hand, the EU and all the public administrations out there have an opportunity to jump on new initiatives, which allow us to create something completely new. The Green Deal is one of these wonderful examples where stepping out and changing the attitude, how to interact with each other, is probably the biggest opportunity we have in the lifetime of the current public administration. Nobody's a total expert. Everybody wants to go there. This is the advantage, this is the luxury we have. It is good for the citizens, it is good for business, it's good for industries, it's good for you, for society. Going back to other projects will not work. Here, the next step for the public administration should be to engage with businesses in the different fields and saying how can we co-opt? And how, once we co-opt together for new routines, can start addressing not only the gap, the cognitive or emotional gap between administration and business, but also the fragmentation inside Brussels or across the different public sectors, because they exist as well. So by providing a new dynamic, you can move together. How does this work in detail? Very simple. When you start giving new goals, you trigger new decision-making processes. Once you trigger new decision-making process, you change power structures. Once you change power structures, you start building new routines, adapted and groomed to match a new world. I seriously believe 50 years ago, something incredible took place and was helpful for most of us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking together today. I think today, 2021, we have the same opportunity. What is required is a new design brief in order to bridge the cognitive and emotional gaps between the administration and the businesses. If we do so, we probably have a wonderful future. Thank you very much.
No lo hemos dicho. Good morning. Thank you so much, Jens, for your intervention. You have triggered a lot of questions. We are going to focus on your presentation related to the previous panel and open up the floor to the audience for questions. We have to apologize that the second member of this panel cannot be with us today. She got a call from the Prime Minister and she had an international mission, so Dr. Antonella May could not join. Therefore, we will stay with you, Jens. We will make the debate through me with the audience. We have got some questions already, so let me bring up the first one I have in front of me. In the context of the recovery and reform agenda, in your opinion, is business a coherent bloc? Aren't there different expectations vis-a-vis the state from the small and medium enterprises, big multinationals, etc.? What is your opinion? Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. This is not one cohesive bloc. Technically, you have the SME, the smaller players, and you have the big players. If you look at the bigger players, most of them actually have a department dealing with public administration, which should alert us. If I invest so much money that I actually have several people on the payroll to deal with public administration, I should ask myself, what's their agenda? That's the reason. Don't listen to everything they say. Be smarter. You have to build the understanding. On the other hand, if I go to those who do not speak up, these are the smaller ones, I think I can learn a lot. So the person who asked the question, absolutely right. They're different groups, they're different segments. But I think, like most of us, the biggest thing is you have to get off the desk. You can't see these things as long as you're sitting at your desk. You have to move back into the field. Look at Singapore. I think one of the wonderful examples of Singapore is no senior civil servant can enter the system without having spent 5 or 6 years in industries before. I think There are many methodologies we've seen or heard in the past, how we can address different groups. We can go back to Edward de Bono in the 80s with smart questioning and creating smart contexts. We can look at what have started in the 90s, live a day with the customer or being out there in the field, up to Blue Ocean. Edward de Bono, look at Citra in Finland. I think there's some participants from Finland. Citra for a long time has been a wonderful organization allowing to trigger questions from these different segments and prompt the government with it. Singapore gave us an examples where people actually have to live in the field for years in order to understand it and see the differences. No, there is no homogeneous. Or if you look at the Obama organization, which used the Blue Ocean as a way to kind of break into areas where we knew we had problems for a long, long time, but nobody was able to solve it. Absolutely right, the different groups, but the method to look at it, the different methods which are out there, the one is as good as the other, allows us to address the different ones. The only recommendation I would have, try to avoid the very extrovert ones. Try to go to the calmer ones. You're going to learn more.
Thank you very much. To conclude, because time pressure is telling us that we have to move to the next panel, I would say that the similarities you have established with a couple in which we have to re-encounter ourselves again and work together, the willingness to learn, the willingness to have adaptation and curiosity, that's the main messages we get out of this panel with. Thank you so much, Mr. Meyer, for your intervention. And now I give the floor to the next panel to my colleague, Isane Aparicio. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Javier.